Here we're going to create the iEntryStore interface, which is going to be responsible for defining the common functionality between the different storage mechanisms that we can use in our application. Now, since we're just creating a plain C# interface, we can actually place all of this code inside of our shared code. Once again, as a reminder, here is a wireframe of the minutes application, and our goal is to store a collection of minutes. However, the challenge is that the data for this list could be coming from anywhere. It could be defined in memory, it could be coming from a local database, it could be coming from a web service. So we're going to actually define an interface called the iEntryStore that's going to represent the operations that all data sources will have in common. The purpose of defining this interface is so that we can start out with one data source, and then throughout the application we can swap out other data sources without having to modify our code in multiple places. Our code can just be dependent on this interface, which can then point to the actual different implementations throughout time. So to do this, our iEntryStore interface is going to define the common operations that all entry stores will have. So first, we'll have read async. This will be a way to retrieve data from the entry store. We'll have write async, which is going to be a way to save data to the entry store. And we'll also have delete async, which is a way to delete an item from the entry store. Now, I'd like to just point out one more thing with this interface. Notice that all three methods contain the word async. And the idea here is that not all of our data sources will be synchronous. You could imagine a situation where our data source is a database or a remote web service, and we won't actually know how long it's going to take before we get a response back from the service. So in that situation, you would want the methods to be asynchronous so that we can keep our UI thread responsive. So here we are in Visual Studio on Windows, and now we're going to create the iEntryStore interface. Now remember, this is going to go into our shared code, so I'm going to right click on our minutes project, and I'm going to go to add new item, and I'm going to try to create an interface. So I'll just go to code, interface, and this is called the iEntryStore. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the interface public. And then let's start defining the operations of the interface. Remember, our first operation is the read async method. And the read async method is going to return a list of entries. Basically, it's going to return the entire entry store to us with this one method call. So in reality, the return type is going to be a list of entries. It's called read async, and it has no parameters. However, remember, we're trying to make this asynchronous, and in C#, a common way to have asynchronous operations is to use the task APIs. So in reality, this should return a task of list of entry. We'll go ahead and we'll include the using statement here. So as you can see, we have read async, and it returns a task of list of entry. This makes the return type here awaitable so that we can return to the UI thread and keep the UI responsive. Now next, we would like to store an entry into the entry store. So that will be our write async method. So this will return a task so that it's awaitable. It's called write async. And as a parameter, it will take in an entry. And then finally, we would like to be able to delete an entry. So the last operation will once again return a task. It's called delete async. And once again, it takes in an entry as a parameter.